How's it going, everyone? I am ZBilbs and I'm back here today with another Metal Albums Ranked video. Today we've got another one that's been a long time coming. If you guys know my channel, you'll know that I am a huge fan of power metal. I've already done a lot of other power metal bands ranked, Halloween, Hammerfall, Sabaton, Powerwolf, and today I've got another OG power metal band to go over, and that of course is Blind Guardian. Now, I listened to these guys a while ago. It's just taken me a long time to get to finally doing a video. But hey, if you enjoy this video, I've got a few more other videos coming out soon. I'm doing Avatar next, and a little bit after this, another classic power metal band with Stradivarius. So hopefully, now that it's summertime, I should be able to get a couple more videos out than usual. But either way, Blind Guardian, I'm going to do their 11 albums, not 12. I'm not going to count the Twilight Orchestra one. That one just feels like a separate thing to me. But all good albums. And without further ado, let's get into my least favorite of these good albums, and that is Follow the Blind. This is their sophomore album, and it's hard to rank any of these because basically every single album is absolutely beloved big time by people. This is often considered one of their better albums, but for me, it's just not quite my style. A lot of their early stuff feels a little bit more speed metal. They don't quite have the more grandiose elements that I really like about Blind Guardian that comes with like the later stuff. I would say starting with Somewhere Far Beyond, there's kind of a shift into the more classic style of Blind Guardian power metal. This still feels a little bit too speed metal-ish for me. There's obviously still a lot of great classic songs. Obviously, Valhalla might be their most famous song of all time. Other good ones like Beyond the Ice and Fast to Madness are solid. But other than Valhalla, this isn't really an album that I see myself coming back to very often. It's really just a couple of songs and not really my preferred style, so I definitely see why people like it a lot. But for me, not really my thing, and so it's going to come in last place at 11. But just ahead of Follow the Blind by a touch, I've got their debut album, Battalions of Fear. Now, these two are very close. They're both kind of the same style. I think a lot of people say Follow the Blind is more power metal and this one is like the only speed metal, but they seem pretty darn close to me. Why this one gets just the edge is I think it's got a slightly better consistency. There's more decent songs on here than Follow the Blind. I like Wizard's Crown, Run for the Night, By the Gates of Moria. I'd say Battalions of Fear is definitely my favorite on here. Just a fun, catchy, great title track. So not too much more to say about this album than Follow the Blind. They're both pretty even, solid albums, just not particularly my thing. Moving on to number 9, I have got A Night at the Opera. This is kind of during their classic age. This is right after Nightfall and Middle-earth. And here's where I think, because, you know, there's the three, like, albums that people consider to be absolute classics, Somewhere Far Beyond, Imaginations, and Nightfall. And you get this one, and this one is very mixed in the community. People either love it or a little bit less so. I'm definitely on the less so side. And for the reason, although I mentioned before, I love these powerful, grandiose, orchestral, at least to an extent, version of Blind Guardian, this is the album that kind of goes a little bit too overboard for me. Although I do like a lot of the epicness, and obviously they put together probably their most epic song of all time, and then there was Silence, a lot of people's favorite, not mine. I don't quite prefer how long and drawn out it is, but still a great grand song in its own right. The whole album just feels just way too like you can't really understand a lot of what Hansi is saying because it just kind of feels like he's screaming all of the words so many times. And it works for a few songs here and there. My favorite is probably Sadly Sings Destiny. Most of these songs I like, but I don't love them because they're just, I don't know, they're way too overblown, too over the top. But some other decent ones, Under the Ice, Maiden and the Minstrel Night, Waiting for an Answer, Age of False Innocence. So There's good stuff on here. It's just a little bit too much. I think it's straying away from the grandiose and epic side of Blind Guardian, and going for an almost like overly symphonic type style that really isn't my thing, but still a decent album overall. Moving on to number 8, another classic album that people absolutely love. I like it, but not a ton. That is Tales from the Twilight World. This album I kind of see as a bridge album between their early kind of speed metalish era and into their kind of classic, more traditional power metal era. And so there's a lot that I like about it, and there's a lot that kind of reminds me of that early era style that I don't quite get into as much. I would say as a whole, it's definitely a really solid album. It's pretty consistent in quality. There's some solid songs that I come back to a decent amount of time. I'd say Welcome to Dying and Lost in the Twilight Hall are my favorite two on this album, but there's other solid ones like Traveler in Time, Lord of the Rings, Tommyknockers, The Last Candle. So definitely a solid album, but once again, even the songs that I like, they're definitely not on that higher tier of their classic era, their more power metal oriented stuff. They're good songs, but I definitely don't come back to them as much because it's still not quite in my favorite style of Blind Guardian, but still a solid album overall. And so that is Tales from the Twilight World at 8. Moving on to number 7. I got my first really controversial pick. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of controversial picks, as is typical for me. Imaginations from the Other Side. Yeah, so obviously, it's hard to place these because they're all good albums. This is one of their most classic, a lot of people's favorite Blind Guardian album. I said that for Follow the Blind, but I really mean it for this one. A lot of people absolutely love this album, and I like it a lot. It's got the style that I like of Blind Guardian. For me, it just doesn't have quite as many top tier songs as other Blind Guardian albums. There's just a good style here. There's a good consistency here. Just nothing that really makes me come back to it. I'd say my favorite two songs in here is Born in a Morning Hall and Bright Eyes. There's obviously other solid classic Blind Guardian songs like Mordred's song, Imaginations from the Other Side, Past and Future Secret, and The Story Ends. All of those are good songs, but very few I listen to it and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to come back and replay it over and over. There's really only, once again, just like Tales from the Twilight World, one or two songs that really keep me coming back. So while I understand why a lot of people love this album, and I think its style is obviously one of the best in terms of Blind Guardian, it's just not quite as memorable to me as other Blind Guardian albums. So moving on to number 6, I've got a newer album, and that is Beyond the Red Mirror. Now, it'll be very apparent, if it's not already, that generally Blind Guardian's later stuff I tend to like more than their early stuff. Maybe it's because, I didn't listen to it back in the day. I listened to it all the way through, so recency bias, but I don't know. But either way, this is the one kind of newer album that I don't love as much as some of the other newer albums that I haven't gotten to. I would say, obviously, I love just the bombastic epicness of a lot of these newer albums, the grandiose, without going too over the top, kind of like Night at the Opera did. This one is, it's got a lot of absolutely top tier Blind Guardian songs, but it's very hit or miss, which is why I don't put it higher. Songs like The Ninth Wave, Twilight of the Gods, Prophecies, At the Edge of Time, one of their best, Distant Memories, The Throne, all are absolutely fantastic songs, memorable, re-listenable, just excellent songs. The problem is, other than that, there isn't too much else great in this album. I think this album is very hit or miss. The songs are either absolutely banger top tier songs or they're completely forgettable songs. So while I think this is a still really great album overall, and it probably in one of my favorite preferred styles of Blind Guardian, it's just not quite as consistent where I can put it any higher. But either way, that is Beyond the Red Mirror at 6. Moving on to number 5, another one that a lot of people have as their favorite. Somewhere Far Beyond. We're getting in these top 5. These are all fantastic albums in my opinion. And this is their first one that I would consider kind of the first true Blind Guardian power metal style. And there's not really too much wrong with this album. The only thing really that holds it back is the fact that they have other better albums in my opinion. But let's see, their best songs in this album, I would say Theater of Pain, the Bard's Song, both of them, In the Forest and The Hobbit, are spectacular. Ashes to Ashes, some other good ones. Oh yeah, Time What Is Time, Journey Through the Dark. So a lot of really solid songs, pretty consistent in quality. There's only 1 or 2, I think, that I skip on this album. It's not any higher because, once again, which has been the case with something like Imaginations from the Other Side, there's not quite as many songs that I think are absolute top tier that I come back to and re-listen to over and over. Even my probably favorite song on this album, Time What Is Time, I don't think I would put it in my top 10 favorite Blind Guardian songs. So while this is a consistent album, it has great quality, as the style that I like, not as many top tier songs where I can put it as high, so apologies, but that is the famous Somewhere Far Beyond at number 5. Moving on to number 4, this is the one album that I absolutely adore that most Blind Guardian fans, or at least the bulk of them, tend to put it at the bottom spot, if not near the bottom, and that is A Twist in the Myth. This album, I think, is really slept on. A lot of people love At the Edge of Time, which obviously I love it too. It hasn't showed up yet. I feel like this one is kind of just At the Edge of Time Part 1. It feels very similar in its style. I think it's very similar in its quality. Maybe it's not quite as epic as At the Edge of Time, but I think it's just a spectacular album. It's incredibly consistent in its quality, and I really don't understand why people don't love this one. My favorite songs from this album, I would say Another Stranger Me is one of my favorite Blind Guardian songs overall. Just a fantastic song. Other great ones, Turn the Page, Fly, Scalds and Shadows, Otherland. There's other solid ones like The New Order and The Edge, and oh yeah, Lionheart. So a lot of great songs, some top tier songs. Really the only reason it's not higher is, once again, there's other albums that are somehow even better. But A Twist in the Myth, I think, incredibly slept on, a really great album, coming in at number 4. Moving on to number 3. I have the last of the classic Blind Guardian albums to talk about, and that is A Nightfall in Middle-earth. This album is, as a Lord of the Rings fan, I still haven't read Silmarillion, which is what this is based off of, but already from the theme alone, you know, this is going to be a special album. I mean, it fits perfectly with Blind Guardian, who's always like has a fantasy aspect with their songs. So matching that with Lord of the Rings is just a match made in heaven, and for good reason. This is one of their most famous albums of all time. Usually I don't like albums that are this long. There's like 22 songs with a lot of like brief, small instrumental interludes. But I think as a whole, considering the majority of these songs are all really solid and there's so many top tier songs, and for the thematic element that they're going for, I think that it all kind of just meshes together really well. And some of the best and most famous Blind Guardian songs of all time are from this album. Into the Storm, Nightfall, Blood Tears, Mirror Mirror, Time Stands Still at the Iron Hill, The Elder. Not only are those good songs, those are like all-time great top 10, 15 Blind Guardian songs. There's a handful of kind of skippable songs, and also, like as I said, the album is pretty long, so it can be kind of hard to go through again. So overall, I think this is absolutely a classic Blind Guardian album. It is pretty darn consistent. It's got some top tier songs. I just couldn't get myself to put it any higher, just because I think other albums have a little bit less bloat and have a little bit more consistency. So although this is incredibly classic, incredibly great, I can't put it any higher than number 3. Moving on to number 2, I have got the aforementioned At the Edge of Time. This album is just It's just epic. I don't think there's a more epic Blind Guardian album than At the Edge of Time, and an epic in a good way, not an epic in an overblown. Everything done here just sounds like just like a powerful freaking anthem, and and works just as like a fun power metal song too. It doesn't feel too over the top. It feels the right pace, the right length. There's no bloat or fluff in here at all. And once again, some absolutely top tier songs. My favorite on this album, probably Sacred Worlds. That song is fantastic. There's so many other great ones like Tanalorn, Into the Void, Control the Divine. You got Road of No Release, Wheel of Time, Valkyries. So once again, just amazing Blind Guardian song or album. Not too much more to say than that. Love the style, love the consistency, great songs. Nothing really wrong with it. The only thing wrong with it is that there's another album that is even better than it, in my opinion. And that is The God Machine, their most recent album. Now, there absolutely could be bias here because this was the album that got me into Blind Guardian. I had heard Blind Guardian songs before I listened to this album, but nothing really caught my attention until I listened to this album as like going over some of the most well-received albums of, I think, 2022, and this one absolutely blew me away. Almost every single song on this album, even though I think there's like 2 songs I don't love, every single other song is an absolute fan-freaking-tastic song. Like, I could go down the list of the entire album, and I think everything except for like Destiny and Architects of Doom, I love every single song. Favorite ones, I'll go like my top 3 on this album: Damnation, Deliver Us from Evil, and maybe Blood of the Elves would be the top 3. But man, it's hard to narrow it down. It's not quite, it doesn't have quite as an epic feel as At the Edge of Time, but like it's its own kind of unique, like heavy, aggressive, but still like powerful, power metal type style is just the perfect, just quintessential embodiment of what everything that Blind Guardian is good at. So, this one probably is as high as it is, a little bit towards recency, due to recency bias, and also because of the time that I got into Blind Guardian. I didn't get in back when their older stuff came out, obviously. But yeah, not too much more to say. I think just absolutely great album, and that is The God Machine at my number 1 spot. So that was my ranking of the 11 Blind Guardian albums. Let me know in the comments, how would you rank the Blind Guardian albums? What other videos would you like to see me do in the future? What other classic power metal or just metal bands would you like me to listen to and rank their stuff? But thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll get a couple more videos out to you soon. But that is all I got for you today. So I will see you later.